You know, I once totally botched a greeting in Japan. I went for a handshake, and it ended up in this awkward bowing, handshaking hybrid. I don't know what I was doing. We both kind of froze.
A first impression fail?
Talk about a first impression fail. But luckily, today's deep dive will help us avoid those kinds of blunders. We're taking a look at a bunch of beginner language learning videos,
Okay.
focusing on greetings and introductions across different languages.
Yeah, it's fascinating how something as simple as hello
Right.
can be so culturally loaded.
Yeah.
We'll be unpacking those nuances and hopefully glean some insights into effective cross-cultural communication.
Exactly. Now, I started noticing some interesting patterns right away. We see phrases like, hello, how are you, and nice to meet you, popping up in English, French, German, Spanish. It's like a universal script for initiating contact.
It's true on the surface.
Yeah.
It speaks to that shared human desire to connect, regardless of language. But even those seemingly universal greetings have hidden depths.
Oh, really? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
For example, you mentioned, how are you? Now, in some cultures, that's a genuine inquiry about someone's well-being.
Yeah.
In others, it's more of a social formality, not meant to be taken literally.
So, like, if someone in Paris asks, ça va?
Yeah.
I shouldn't launch into a detailed explanation of my day.
Probably not the best approach.
Okay.
Understanding those subtle differences in pragmatics, how language is actually used in social contexts, is key to navigating these interactions successfully.
Makes sense. Now, what about those languages that get a little fancier with their greetings? Like German with Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, and Guten Abend?
Right.
I can barely remember one good morning, let alone three.
Well, the time-specific greetings are interesting because they reflect a culture's attention to detail and formality. It's not just about conveying a message. It's about doing so in a way that's socially appropriate.
Speaking of social appropriateness, let's talk about self-introductions.
Sure.
Our sources highlighted some pretty significant cultural differences there.
Yeah.
One even mentioned that using your full name is a must in India.
Right.
While in many Western cultures, it's all about first names.
Yeah.
Even in professional settings.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding sociolinguistics comes into play. Okay. How social factors like status and context influence language use. Introducing yourself with your full name in India might convey respect and formality. Yeah. While in a more egalitarian Western setting, it might come across as stiff or overly formal.
Okay, so it's not just about the words themselves, but the unspoken rules that govern how we use them.
Exactly.
It's like learning a secret handshake for each culture.
Those handshakes can be surprisingly intricate.
Well, one handshake that really caught my attention was this whole partner thing. One of our sources pointed out how English speakers are increasingly using partner to describe their significant other. Right. Especially when terms like boyfriend or girlfriend feel too casual. Yeah. But specific labels like fiancé don't quite fit. It's like a whole new category of relationship status has emerged.
That's a fascinating example of language evolving.
It is.
That's like societal changes.
Right. So I'm curious, have other languages undergone similar shifts in how they describe relationships? Is partner gaining traction globally, or is this more of an English language phenomenon?
That's a great question.
Yeah?
And one that would require deeper exploration. Some languages might have adopted similar gender-neutral terms, while others might stick to more traditional labels.
Okay.
It would be interesting to see if those linguistic choices reflect broader cultural attitudes towards relationships.
It definitely raises some intriguing questions.
It does.
About how language mirrors our evolving social norms. I'm starting to see these greetings and introductions as more than just polite formalities. Yeah. They're like linguistic snapshots of cultural values and beliefs.
Precisely. And understanding those deeper layers adds a whole new dimension to language learning. Yeah. It's not just about communication. Right. It's about cultural insight.
So now that we've dipped our toes into the cultural complexities of greetings, let's get practical. Yep. What are some key takeaways for making a stellar first impression in a new language? What really stood out to you from our sources?
Well, while a genuine smile and confident delivery are universally appreciated.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, true. Smiling is good. Got it.
Yeah.
But let's dig a little deeper.
Okay.
Are there any specific linguistic strategies or phrases that can help us avoid those first impression fumbles?
Of course. One thing that often trips up language learners is the level of formality. In some cultures, addressing someone with their title and last name
Mhm.
is crucial, even in casual settings.
Oh.
In others, using first names right from the start is perfectly acceptable.
The formal versus informal dance. It's
Exactly.
like trying to figure out when to bow, when to shake hands, when to air kiss. So much potential for awkwardness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why paying attention to those cultural cues is so important.
One cue that caught my eye was this tidbit about contractions in English. Apparently using I'm instead of I am
Uh-huh.
can make you sound more approachable and natural. It's like a linguistic shortcut to sounding like a native speaker.
It illustrates how even seemingly minor pronunciation details
Yeah.
can subtly influence how we are perceived.
So it's not just about getting the words right.
Right.
It's about delivering them in a way that's culturally appropriate and conveys the right message.
Precisely. Language is about more than just conveying information. It's about building rapport, showing respect, and navigating those intricate social dances.
Speaking of intricate social dances, let's talk about body language.
Okay.
We've touched on bowing versus handshaking.
Yeah.
But what other nonverbal cues should we be aware of?
Well, eye contact is a fascinating one. In many Western cultures, direct eye contact is seen as a sign of confidence and engagement.
Uh-huh.
But in some Asian cultures, it can be interpreted as aggressive or disrespectful.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference.
It is.
So what's the takeaway there? Should we be staring everyone down or avoiding eye contact altogether?
The key is to be aware of the cultural norms
Okay.
and adjust accordingly.
So it's back to that idea of cultural sensitivity again.
Absolutely. And that's why I find those language learning videos so valuable. They often provide insights into those nonverbal cues alongside the spoken phrases.
Right. They go beyond just the words and grammar, giving you a glimpse into the cultural context.
Exactly. It's like learning the choreography of that cultural dance.
Speaking of choreography, I noticed that a lot of the sample dialogues in those videos are quite structured and repetitive.
Right.
It's like, hello, my name is, nice to meet you, where are you from?
Yeah.
Kind of a language learning script.
Of course. Those are meant to provide a basic framework, a starting point.
Okay.
But real-life conversations are rarely that predictable, are they?
Definitely not. It's more like improvisational jazz with all sorts of unexpected twists and turns.
Exactly. And that's where the real learning happens.
Yeah.
When you step outside those scripted scenarios and engage in those spontaneous interactions.
So those videos are like the training wheels, getting you ready for the real biking adventure.
Precisely. They give you the tools, but it's up to you to take them out on the open road.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more equipped for that open road adventure after diving into these resources. And you know what else I'm realizing?
What's that?
It's not just about avoiding those awkward blunders. It's about appreciating the richness and diversity of global communication styles.
Absolutely.
Even something as simple as hello can be a window into another culture's values and traditions.
That's what makes language learning so fascinating. It's a journey of cultural discovery.
Yeah.
As much as it is about linguistic acquisition.
Well said. And speaking of cultural discovery, did you notice anything particularly surprising or intriguing about how different cultures approach greetings and introductions?
You know, one thing that really stood out to me was the way some cultures incorporate nonverbal gestures into their greetings.
Right.
We talked about bowing in Japan, but some of our sources mentioned even more elaborate rituals.
Oh, like what? Do tell. I'm all about elaborate rituals.
Well, in Thailand, for instance, the traditional way involves a slight bow with palms pressed together in front of the chest. And the higher the hands are held, the more respect is conveyed. It's like a whole language of respect embedded in a single gesture.
That's incredible. It makes a simple handshake seem so basic. I love how these greetings are like little cultural performances.
Exactly. They're not just about conveying a message. They're about enacting a cultural script.
Okay. So we've talked about the universal greetings, but one thing I noticed is that there are some pretty unique greetings out there that are specific to certain cultures. For example, in one of the German language videos, it mentioned the phrase service.
Service. It's fascinating because it's used in a few different regions. Primarily in southern Germany, Austria, and parts of Eastern Europe. And what's really interesting is that its origins can be traced back to Latin.
No way! Latin, so like ancient Roman times.
Exactly. It's believed to have evolved from the Latin phrase servus humilimus, which means your most humble servant.
Okay.
So you can see how that sense of humility and respect
Wow.
is still embedded in the modern usage.
Wow, that's a much richer history.
It is than I expected for a casual greeting. So it's like a linguistic time capsule.
It is.
Carrying those ancient Roman values into modern-day interactions.
Precisely. And that's what makes language so fascinating. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
But it also carries echoes of the past.
So with a phrase like service, context is key, right? You wouldn't want to accidentally use it in a super formal setting or with someone you've just met.
Right. It's generally used in more informal settings among friends or acquaintances. It would be interesting to see how its usage varies across regions and generations.
So that's a good point. Like maybe younger people use it more often, or maybe it's more common in certain rural areas. Language is like a living, breathing thing.
It is.
Constantly adapting to different contexts.
And those variations are what makes studying language so rewarding. It's like peeling back the layers of a cultural onion, revealing all these hidden nuances.
Speaking of cultural nuances...
Our sources also touched on the importance of politeness in introductions. I found it interesting that some phrases like "excuse me" or "sorry" are used differently in various English-speaking cultures.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
In the United Kingdom, for instance, sorry is often used as a way of expressing empathy or politeness, even when no apology is necessary.
It's like a reflex. I've definitely noticed that with my British friends.
Yeah.
It can be a bit confusing at first, but once you understand the underlying meaning, it's actually quite charming.
It is. It reflects a cultural emphasis on politeness and deference.
It's like saying, I acknowledge your presence and respect your space. It's subtle, but it speaks volumes about those cultural values.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole concept of small talk, which can be a minefield for language learners. Our sources offered some helpful tips on navigating those initial conversations.
Small talk, it's that awkward stage where you're not quite friends yet, but you're trying to find common ground.
Right. It can be so nerve-wracking in your native language, let alone a foreign one.
Indeed. It requires a delicate balance of being engaging without being too intrusive.
One source suggested paying attention to local news headlines as a way to find common ground for conversation. It's like a cheat sheet for relevant small talk topics.
It's a good strategy, especially in more formal settings or when you're new to a place. But it does assume a certain level of shared knowledge and interest in current events.
Right. What if you're not into following current events?
Yeah.
Or what if you're in a more casual setting where talking about politics or the economy might be a bit heavy? What are some other strategies for striking up a conversation?
Well, several of our sources emphasize the importance of finding shared interests. Questions like, what do you like to do in your spare time? Or have you read any good books lately? Can open up conversations about hobbies, passions, and leisure activities. Oh, I love that. It's like a fast track to finding common ground and building rapport. It also takes the pressure off having to sound intelligent or informed. You can just be yourself and share what you're passionate about.
Precisely. And those conversations can often lead to deeper connections and friendships.
Yeah.
Which is one of the beautiful things about language learning. It's not just about acquiring a skill. It's about opening yourself up to new relationships and experiences.
It's so true. It's like unlocking a whole new world.
It is.
Social connections.
And sometimes those connections can be forged through surprisingly simple means. One of our sources even highlighted how sharing a bit about your family, kids, pets, siblings, can be a great icebreaker.
Yeah.
Especially in more casual settings.
Oh, totally. It's like instant relatability. Everyone has a family story, whether it's heartwarming, hilarious, or a bit of both. It's a great way to find those universal human experiences that transcend language barriers.
It is. And it can also lead to cultural exchange.
Yeah.
As you share different traditions and perspectives on family life.
Okay, so we've talked about greetings, introductions, politeness, small talk. What are some other essential phrases that learners should have in their toolkit? What are those linguistic life rafts that can help us navigate those choppy conversational waters?
Well, knowing how to ask for help or clarification is crucial. Phrases like, excuse me, could you please repeat that? Or, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Could you please explain? Are incredibly helpful in navigating everyday situations.
I can totally see that. It's like a linguistic safety net.
It is.
When you're feeling lost in translation. And it shows that you are making an effort.
Right.
to understand, which I imagine is always appreciated.
Exactly. It demonstrates a willingness to learn and engage,
Yeah.
which can go a long way in building positive communication. It also shows that you're not afraid to admit when you don't understand something,
Right.
which is a sign of humility and respect.
Okay. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about the role of technology in language learning. Many of these YouTube videos we've been diving into use visual aids and interactive exercises to teach greetings and introductions. Do you think these tools are effective?
I do. The use of multimedia and interactive tools can significantly enhance language acquisition. Visuals can help learners associate words with images, creating stronger memory connections.
It's like bringing language to life.
Yeah.
Making it more engaging and memorable. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I used an app that had these fun little animations for each new word.
Oh, nice.
It definitely helped those words stick in my brain.
Exactly. And those interactive exercises provide opportunities for active practice and reinforcement.
Yeah.
Which is crucial for internalizing new language.
It's like having a virtual language partner guiding you through the learning process. One source I found particularly interesting was a video on American English pronunciation. It went into detail about how even subtle differences in pronunciation can impact how you come across in conversation.
What's fascinating about pronunciation is that it goes beyond simply saying words correctly.
Yeah.
It's about intonation, stress, and rhythm, which can convey a lot of meaning and emotion.
It's like the music of language.
Exactly. And mastering those subtle nuances can make a huge difference in how fluent and natural you sound. It can also help you avoid misunderstandings or unintended offense.
One thing that struck me from that pronunciation video was the importance of contractions in American English. It mentioned how using I'm instead of I am can make you sound more relaxed and approachable.
It's true. Contractions are common in everyday speech, and using them can make your English sound more natural and fluent. It's also a good indicator of your confidence and comfort with the language.
It's like a linguistic shortcut to sounding like a native speaker. And then there's the whole world of body language, which can be just as important as the words we use, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nonverbal communication plays a huge role in how we are perceived, especially when meeting someone for the first time.
One source mentioned how making eye contact and smiling are universally positive gestures, regardless of the language you speak.
It's true.
Yeah.
These gestures convey openness, friendliness, and confidence, which are essential for making a good first impression.
Yeah.
They're like nonverbal greetings, signaling our good intentions.
It's like a universal language of kindness.
Yes.
But of course, there are some cultural differences
Of course.
when it comes to body language. We've already talked about how bowing is more common in Japan, while handshakes are more common in the U.S.
Yes. And there are many other subtle differences to be aware of. For example, in some cultures, it's considered rude to point with your finger.
Really?
While in other cultures, it's perfectly acceptable.
It's like learning a whole new set of social cues. And sometimes these differences can lead to misunderstandings or awkward situations. I remember once in Italy, I accidentally offended someone by gesturing with my hands in a way that was apparently quite rude. I had no idea.
That's why cultural sensitivity and awareness are so important in language learning. It's not just about learning words, but understanding the culture that those words come from.
It's like learning to speak the language of respect and understanding. And that brings us to another important point, the importance of being patient with yourself when you're learning a new language.
Learning a language is a journey, not a destination. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to make mistakes along the way.
It's so true. It's like learning any new skill. You have to be willing to stumble and get back up again.
And remember to celebrate the small victories. Every new word learned, every successful conversation, every aha moment is a cause for celebration.
Well said. It's about embracing the process and finding joy in the journey. So we've covered a ton of ground here. From cultural quirks and greetings to the importance of body language, we've explored a whole spectrum of communication strategies.
And it's all connected to the idea that language is more than just words.
Right.
It's a reflection of culture, values, and social norms.
Totally. It's like a window into another way of seeing the world.
And that's what makes language learning so enriching and rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery, both linguistic and cultural.
Absolutely. It's like opening a door to a whole new world of understanding and connection. And on that note, I have a question for our listener. If you could choose one culture's greeting or introduction ritual
Yeah.
to adopt in your own life, which one would it be and why?
It's a fascinating question to ponder. There are so many beautiful and meaningful ways to connect with others across cultures.
Right. Perhaps it's the warmth of the Italian chow, the formality of the Japanese bow, or the heartfelt sincerity of a traditional Indian greeting.
Whatever resonates with you. The key is to approach these rituals with respect and a genuine desire to connect.
Exactly. It's not about appropriating or mimicking, but about appreciating the diversity of human expression.
And who knows, maybe by adopting some of these greetings, we can bring a bit more mindfulness and intention to our own daily interactions.
Yeah, that's a thought-provoking idea. Instead of those rushed hellos and distracted nods, we could pause, make eye contact, and really acknowledge the person in front of us.
Precisely. It's about infusing those everyday greetings with a sense of presence and connection.
Speaking of presence and connection, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. Remember how we talked about those language learning videos being like training wheels, preparing us for real-life conversations?
Yes, I remember. It's the difference between practicing scales and playing a piece of music.
Exactly. Those videos give us the tools, the building blocks, but it's in those spontaneous interactions that language truly comes alive.
It's where we move beyond memorized phrases and start to improvise, to express ourselves authentically.
And that's where those little mistakes, those fumbles, actually become valuable learning experiences.
Absolutely. Mistakes are inevitable, and embracing them as part of the process is crucial for language growth. It's through those stumbles that we refine our understanding and develop fluency.
It's like learning to dance. They're going to step on some toes, miss a beat, maybe even trip and fall. But it's all part of the process.
Precisely. And just like with dancing, the more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you become.
One source even pointed out that native speakers often appreciate when language learners make an effort, even if their grammar isn't perfect or their pronunciation is a bit off.
It shows humility, a willingness to learn, and a genuine respect for their language and culture.
It's like saying, hey, I'm trying, I'm putting myself out there, and that vulnerability can be incredibly disarming.
Indeed, it can create a bridge of empathy and understanding between people from different linguistic backgrounds.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of real-life practice, embracing mistakes, and showing vulnerability. But let's not forget the sheer joy of language learning. It's not just about the practical benefits of communication, it's about the thrill of discovery, the expansion of your worldview, the connections you forge across cultures.
It's a journey of personal growth and enrichment. It opens up new ways of thinking, seeing, and experiencing the world.
Totally. It's like opening a door to a whole new universe of experiences and perspectives.
And that sense of wonder and curiosity is what keeps language learners motivated and engaged.
Well said. So to wrap things up, we've explored the fascinating world of greetings and introductions, from the universal to the culturally specific, from the verbal to the nonverbal. We've delved into the importance of politeness, the nuances of small talk, the role of technology, and the sheer joy of the language learning journey.
And it all boils down to the idea that language is a powerful tool for connection, understanding, and personal growth.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. As you continue your language learning adventure, remember, it's not just about mastering the mechanics of a language. It's about embracing the cultural richness and human connections that language unlocks. So keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep that spark of curiosity alive. Until next time, happy language learning.